Good morning, drivers and operators. I decided to present this webinar in order to give insight and information to a very controversial topic, shady brokers and what to look for. My name is Jim McNulty, and my background is in trucking, dispatching, and dirt work. As this construction trucking season begins to heat up, we all need to do our homework on one, who we are working for, and two, making sure we all get paid. I've brought in an industry expert to aid in tips and strategies, make sure your business runs smoothly and soundly. Please welcome Mike Gomez. Good morning, Mike. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Jim, you sound a little bit uptight this morning.
Yeah, a little too much coffee.
I noticed. So anyways, just give you a little bit of background on myself. I was an owner-operator in the gravel hauling business for many years in the Pacific Northwest area. During that time, definitely made a lot of mistakes that cost me a ton of money. Seeing these same market dynamics today, I just want to be on the show today to give some tips to help avoid make the same mistakes that I, in fact, made over the course of the years.
Thank you. Sounds like you're pretty experienced in the trucking industry.
Jim, if only I had that same amount of experience in the bedroom.
We all do. So let's get started. Who are gravel trucking brokers? Sometimes they can be trucking companies that subcontract extra trucks needed on large projects. They can be large firms that exclusively deal with a large construction project truck brokering or one-off brokering in large cities. They also can be owner-operators who tell contractors, I can get 50 trucks right now. And lastly, there are the OTR brokers who see an opportunity in the construction market. So Mike, what do you see in the market for brokers at this point?
So as you mentioned here, the four different types of gravel trucking brokers, I'd say the first two would be on the top end. They're probably going to be a lot more qualified off the bat, just, giving it an arbitrary eye. Trucking companies that have, 30 trucks on a job, but they need 45, so they have to contract out another 15. Typically those type of guys are pretty legit. And then there are some larger brokers. You see them in bigger cities, guys that own their own trailers. They make the owner-operators hook and book. And those guys do a lot of one-off stuff too, but they're pretty legit guys as well. You get down towards the bottom of the list. I'd say the bottom two are in the lower realm. You have the owner-operators that tell guys, hey, I could get you 50 trucks. I got 50 friends. We could set a hole in tomorrow. Problem with a guy like that is these type of trucking companies, I get what they're trying to do, and it's nothing that they're doing incorrectly. You're trying to get your truck working on the jobs, and the only way you could do that, a superintendent will tell them is, hey, bro, you got to give me all of the trucks on the job, not just your own. I want to consolidate the trucking. So, just doing what you can. You have a bunch of buddies that you network with, and you say, hey, let's just all tag on and get this job licked. Problem with that is on a larger project, cash flow is going to be a concern. Some of the larger projects, you could be somewhere between $400,000 a month and $1 million a month, and just in revenue. And being able to pay everybody becomes very challenging, especially when you don't get paid 60 to 90 days. And then on top of that, you're looking at tremendous amounts of administrative duties. So with that being said, we'll dive into that a little further down the line here. Going to the next type of broker that to me would be on a lower realm is the OTR brokers that dive into the construction market. A lot of these types of companies, they're typically, you got to understand, it's somebody that works out of their office, out of their home, out of their garage or whatever, and is used to just connecting A with B. There's a load of cherries that has to get loaded out in Washington, headed to the Bronx. Got a couple of days. You got a couple of days where you need to get that truck loaded, and then another week before it has to be delivered out in like Hunts Point in the Bronx. So
what do you see the problem with the OTR brokers? That I want to hit on.
It's a completely different market. You have to understand how construction works. You have certain ways that material needs to get delivered. You need to, have a certain type of flow. It's not as simple as connecting, this load of gravel needs to go from A to B. There's not just one load of gravel. On a closer cycle, you could be hauling between 10 and 20 loads per truck per day, and they got to get routed into all different spots. That's just not really in their wheelhouse.
Understand. Thank you. So let's dive right into some of the benefits of working with a broker. You can work on several different projects in many different areas. You work for one customer You have very easy collections. You're not sending out 15 different invoices to 15 different customers. You have one centralized point. You don't have to piece work together and hustle work. Instead of spending time calling everyone all day, you're in your truck making money. You can also develop long-term relationships.
Yeah, I agree. And just kind of elaborating on that, Jim, I think that, in my own experience when I first got going, it was a pain in the neck to go job site to job site, hustling work and having multiple customers. Problem is, it was pretty difficult to put together a full day's worth of work, let alone a full week's worth of work. And then,
I bet it was.
Yeah, but the worst part about it was then, as you know, going back and trying to collect money from these dudes. I got to find them. Magically, they disappear the day after the job is done. They're nowhere to be found. And, trying to pick up a $200 check here, $400 check there. It was a mess. I wish I would have been able to work with a valuable broker, because that would have made things a lot easier. I could concentrate on making money.
Yeah, first it's we didn't get the invoice, and then it's you didn't do the work, and then it's just how that evolves.
Hey Jim, what just happened to you yesterday?
What just happened to me yesterday was the same process. It is, I swear, with a lot of contractors and brokers. This was with a broker, and I did not do my homework. Guess what? Homeboy doesn't have a business license. Mm-hmm. That should have been a red flag. And I'm just constantly battling with them currently on getting paid. Luckily, this is not a huge sum of money to a lot of people. To me, it is.
I think every dollar. If I'm out there trucking, greasing the truck, putting on brakes, fixing wheel seals, doing that type of stuff, I don't want to give another guy $1.
Yeah. First, it's we never got your invoice. Then it's we don't have your paperwork. Then it's we don't process until this date. And then the next one that's going to pop up is we had questions on the invoice or questions on the service you provided.
2 months later.
2 months. That is exactly correct.
So anyways, guys, we just want to make sure before the brokers, there's definitely a benefit to working with a qualified broker. I just want to make sure we're going to give you some tips on what to look for, so you're not just jumping into bed the second somebody presents a great project opportunity for you, because it could be the kiss of death. So first,
what to look for. So the first step to take when a broker reaches out to you for work is to look them up on the FMCSA website.
Oh, the FMCSA.
My favorite. So even though their rules and regulations are constantly changing and they're very, very frustrating to deal with, they do actually have accurate and up-to-date information on their website.
Yeah, I agree, Jim. I think I do not like the FMCSA for obvious reasons, crossing the scales in different states, whether we're in town or 5 states away. Why the hell do I have to be nervous every time I cross over a scale, loaded or empty? But I will agree with you here. Their website is probably one of the only good things that I see that they do.
Yeah. So first of all, make sure they are a certified freight broker and freight forwarder.
Yeah. And one thing to kind of touch up on that, I think that there is a loophole around that. If you go to work for a broker that's shipping intrastate, for example, they have loads from Amarillo to San Antonio, they technically don't need a broker authority. But to me, we'll get into it a little bit later as to why that's still a necessity, because you don't have any recourse on getting paid. Again, we'll dive into that as we advance here.
Also, make sure they do have a DOT and MC number and they're active and in good standing. And lastly, make sure they have a broker bond. So, Mike, with this broker bond, how hard is it to get one? And I guess, do you really need one?
As I mentioned earlier, theoretically, if you're hauling intrastate, you're brokering loads intrastate, you don't need one. Again, the problem that I see is you don't have any recourse. And how easy is it to get it? Well, it depends on your credit. If your credit is Swiss cheese, there's no way that any type of surety company, which is French for insurance, is going to give you a $75,000 broker bond. So you're crap out of luck. But you know what, truckers? That's a good thing, because you don't want somebody who can't get a simple $75,000 bond to be brokering work to you, because the chances of them being able to pay you becomes pretty slim.
So kind of what I'm getting from this is I should definitely run the other way if I'm approached by a broker for a large job and I look up and he does not have a broker bond.
Whether that freight is intrastate or interstate, The answer is absolutely. Because again, if homeboy doesn't pay you, what's your recourse to get paid?
I would have to go to civil court, which that's not fun. That's a waste of time.
Well, it's not free, is it?
It is not free.
No, that's correct. And then the chance of you getting paid, even if you're able to file a suit and win, doesn't matter. You could sue somebody for $10,000, $100,000, win the case. That doesn't mean you're going to get paid by them.
Yeah, if he doesn't have money, there's no money to.
You got it. So, Jim, I'm just going to show you a couple of the steps that I go through on the FMCSA website to look up whether or not they do have this broker bond. So I'm going to go through the next slide here. The first thing you're going to do is go on Google and look up SAFER. You just type in the Google search bar, SAFER lookup. And then from there, it brings you to this screen, and you can type in the DOT number or type in the name of the company. And then once you click search, and here's their full profile. So if you look on the left here, it says entity type at the top left. Are they just a carrier? Are they a carrier / shipper or freight forwarder? Are they just a broker? So it's somewhat, the problem with the entity type here is it's still a little bit ambiguous. One thing I want to mention before we advance is if it says inactive, you're like, okay, maybe I searched the wrong company. You search the next company in line because say it's ABC Trucking and there were 5 ABC Truckings from McCullough, Texas. You click into the next one, inactive. You click into the next one, inactive. You click into the next one, they're active. The problem is all 4 guys that you clicked into, it was ABC Trucking with the same exact address. That to me is also a red flag. Why did their entity get closed 4 times?
I think you're right on that one.
Absolutely. There's something fun, something goofy is going on. But anyways, go to the top right here, and this is where your safety really lies. You don't have to do anything else after this. On the top right where you see I have a red circle and an arrow, it says licensing and insurance. You click on that, bring it to this screen. Technically, there's a screen in between that just asks you to identify something. But you go here, and there's a circle. It says click report. Once I click it to report, this is the mother load. This is going to tell me, am I safe? You see I have a circled area down here. It says bond required, no. Bond on file, no. If there is no bond on file, you have no way to get paid. If there is a bond on file, beautiful thing. If the trucking company stiffs you for whatever reason, either they got themselves into a pinch where their child got into a car accident, didn't have insurance, and had to come up with a boatload of money to pay for their child's care, they get accounts receivable from the general contractor and pay for that care instead of paying you. You know, like I said, sometimes it isn't ill-intentioned that you don't get paid. Other times it is a crook that knows exactly what they're doing and takes the money and runs. But with this bond on file, you can easily go, you click into the bonding company, you simply make a phone call and say, I was working for this carrier. Here's a proof of the loads that I hold, and they will distribute money from that bond. So,
yeah, I appreciate the info, Mike. That's very good. Make sure to use this FMCSA website, especially on this application.
By far, the most important item here.
So let's talk about websites.
Let's talk about
websites. My personal opinion is you need to have a website. If you're a broker, you need to have one. You know, the carriers as well as the customers should be able to find your website and shouldn't have to search 4 or 5 pages into Google to find some Yelp page. So a broker must have a website. That is going to be their livelihood. If not, they might just try to make a quick buck, bootleg work, and not pay you. And also make sure it is presentable.
I totally agree with you, Jim. You're going to work for a company that says, hey, I got 300,000 tons of material to move, and they don't have a website. I mean, I don't understand. It's 2018. It's pretty inexpensive to get a website. And the bottom line is this. If a developer was paying a construction company to build the Freedom Tower in New York City, and do you think that they would hire somebody that doesn't even have a website?
I don't think they would.
No, they don't exist. So how do you track them down?
That's the hard one, is tracking them down.
Who are they?
Correct.
So
next, Office. This kind of piggybacks on our last topic. do they actually have an office, and can you see it on Google Earth? Is it a point in the middle of a field? You want to make sure that brokers who are working out of their house, that should be a little bit of a concern, at least to me, because of cash constraints. What do you think about that, Mike?
Yeah, Jim, again, absolutely. I take a look at this and say it's quite different if somebody's brokering you a job that's $1,000 and somebody's brokering a job that's $3 million worth of trucking. I understand when somebody gets going, you got to start somewhere, right? I know when I first got going, I didn't have a shop for 2 years because I couldn't afford it. And then when I did get a shop, I found a place that was $300 a month. I think it was $275, and the rent got pushed up to $300 a month. It was a shed. I used to call it the ghetto shed. The place was brutal. It was actually easier to pull the truck outside and work on it because it was warmer than inside the shop there. But the bottom line is this. I didn't chase any large projects because I knew there'd be no way that I could cash flow it. At the end of the day, Jim, contractors pay every 60 to 90 days. Even if you go to work for a turn of construction, and even in a contract, it'll say, oh, yeah, by the way, we pay every 15 to 30 days. It's always 60 to 90 days. What is the problem with that? Unless the broker has millions of dollars in a holding account to distribute to the truckers, there's no way the truckers could get paid like they need to get paid. Some every week, some every 2 weeks, and definitely at the longest every month. Because as an owner operator, you have bills. Your fuel, if you're working on a remote project, you're going to need a universal fuel card. You have to pay that every week, which by the way, I can't stand. And then the next thing is you got insurance. That's not cheap. And then repairs. Your truck always breaks down, as you guys know, every day. There's always something. And the bottom line is you're working on a remote project and you don't have your crap with you and you have a wheel seal that goes bad. It is kind of demoralizing to take your truck into a shop for a wheel seal. Simple repair. Not quite sure why that winds up becoming $1,000.
Always $1,000.
It's ridiculous. I love how when they replace your brake shoe because it was oil soaked, that's fine. But why do you have to replace the brake drum, which is definitely within spec? So, and then I don't understand. I love when there's like the incidental charge and it's like for supplies.
Shop supplies.
I love that. So the parts were already itemized, but somehow the can of brake fluid was $50. All right?
Yep.
I don't understand where that comes from. I can imagine the rags. They're using gold-plated rags. But going back to that point, guys, the truckers are going to need to get paid much quicker, and somebody is going to – and a smaller broker that works out of their garage is not going to have the resources to be able to handle – working on a much larger project. And I hate to add one more item here, but I must. That also goes with administrative function. When you're processing hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of tickets every week, every month for a project, a small office just would not be able to handle that. And again, that goes back to even when I remember when I got going, I just couldn't tackle those large projects. I didn't have a fleet of people in the office to do all the processing and submit exactly the way the contractor requires it. So,
well, that's some good information, Mike. And I think you're dead on about that 60 to 90 days.
Is that the first time that we agree on something?
It might be. So here's one that at least hits home for me. Make sure that they are licensed to do business in the state they ask you to haul in. So what I didn't do, which I should have done, was go to the Secretary of State website and see if they're actually a registered contractor. When I did this, as I was having payment issues with this contractor, I saw they didn't have a business license. Granted, if I had done that before I worked for them, I would not have probably worked for them. So make sure you do your research. This can be life or death in terms of getting paid. Talk to other truckers, ask around, get some references and figure out, do these guys pay? Are they honest? How long have they been in business? Do they have a lot of experience working on these jobs? And do they actually have experience running their own trucks? Because if they do not, they won't be able to relate.
You're right, Jim. They're not going to know that you're going to get caught up at the scales for an hour or 2 hours. And Jim, this is my favorite. What is an estimator that's never driven a truck before think? How long does it take to travel 60 miles?
He's going to go on Google and say, well, 60 miles should be probably 45 to 50 minutes.
Pretty sure I can't grab 13 gears in 2 seconds.
Yeah, well, a lot of these guys think that, unfortunately, and a lot of dispatchers do as well. Why isn't the truck there yet? He should be there. Just a lot of people don't have the experience to know how long it takes to get somewhere in a truck versus a car.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of expanding on that, Jim, this one I definitely got killed on. Back in 2008, when the economy crashed, got hooked up with this excavation contractor. This wasn't a broker in this particular case, but again, along the same premise. I had a bunch of work up in the mountains.
And you're probably excited to eat a bunch of work.
Hell yeah, because everybody else is like, shit, what am I going to do? I have no work. And I was like, this is awesome. We got a ton of work. I'm going to be busy for the next year. I didn't stop for 2 seconds to make a couple phone calls, say, hey, who is this guy? And then to make matters worse, I was buying the gravel with zero markup.
Sounds like a pretty good deal for
he
him.
had a wonderful, come on, Jim, does it really stop there? I was quote unquote whining and dining him. But anyways, I wound up getting stiffed originally for $123,000. Now, and I only had one truck at that time. So luckily, I was able to find out he was getting a check from the general contractor. So I parked outside general contractor's office. I was there for 3 or 4 hours. Friggin' fell asleep. And I remember it was right around lunchtime. I don't know what the hell woke me up, but I woke up and saw his dead ass walking across the street, and I was able to get out of pickup and cut him off. And I was able to get him to forward that check directly to me. That still left an open balance of $59,000 and some change. And I never got that money, the remaining money.
That's a hard hit right there.
Yeah, and
especially in a recession.
It doesn't matter who you are and when.
Yeah.
That's a gigantic amount of money. I don't care if you're a small company or a multi-million-dollar company. It's a tremendous amount of money. And the thing is I didn't do any research at all. I was so excited and so hasty to go to work. I guarantee all I had to do is make one phone call in town and say, hey, who is this Jason guy? Do you guys know anything about him? And they'd be like, dude, stay away from that guy. He owes people money in Wyoming, Idaho, Montana. And then I could have made the decision and say, dude, I better not go to work for this guy. So
yeah, I think we both have some good experiences dealing with getting stiffed and not following what we should have.
Yeah, absolutely.
So next is pay and contract. Whenever you're given a rate for a project, make sure, double check the fine print. Does that include any sort of hidden fees? A check fee, a deposit fee, an admin fee, a broker fee? And make sure, does it say you will be paid when we get paid? Because that is a big red flag. What do you think about that, Mike?
So 2 things, going back to the pay, Jim. Nothing more annoying than somebody saying, oh, yeah, I'm going to pay $110 an hour. Oh, yeah, that's sweet. And then you finally get paid and you realize after all these settlements, which, to be honest with you, I don't understand. A settlement should be, hey, they were paying for your fuel. Hey, they were paying for your insurance.
Yes.
That's a settlement, a legitimate settlement. Having a broker fee and admin fee taken out after you told me how much you were going to pay me, that's bullcrap. You're lying. So I would rather somebody say, hey, you're getting paid $85 an hour instead of thinking I was making $110 an hour. And then when I get my check two months down the road, I'm only getting paid $85 an hour.
Yeah, and you can't budget.
Hey, Jim, it's funny. This is a little off the cuff here. Honestly, it's 2018. You should also be getting paid direct deposit. It does kind of scare me when people pay by paper check. It's just a beautiful excuse not to pay. Jim, what happened to you yesterday? Why didn't they give you a check?
It got lost in the mail.
And then what? What did they need from you?
And then they needed a W-9, workman's comp, and all this 1 month after I just sent them all the recent information.
And you actually have an email that shows that they opened the email with all that info.
That is correct.
So what does that sound like to me? That sounds like they were just looking to buy some more time to not cut you a check.
That is correct.
How about just tell you the truth?
Just say, we don't have the money right now, or someone stiffed us. That's why we can't pay you. Then at least I could say, okay, I understand that.
Absolutely. But, going back to that, I do think in this day and age, you should be working for companies that pay electronically, because then that's pretty much not having an excuse to say, oh, my God, you didn't get that check yet? Meanwhile, they never even wrote the check. So, yeah. And then the paid when they will get paid. That's a pretty scary one. Number one, again, I discussed in a previous slide there, trucker can't really afford to get paid every 30, 60, or 90 days. That's the broker's responsibility for that particular type of collection. And again, the scary part about that is when you do get paid that late and realize that you got short paid by quite a bit, it's almost impossible to have recourse to get paid the balance.
Eric, you're correct on that. I mean, I believe you've had some experiences where you've been even over 90 days out on projects.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty common. And the thing is, whether or not you're a broker or the trucking company, that is very difficult. But for the trucking company, you got quite a bit of cost going into it. Again, going back to fuel, if you have a driver behind the wheel, you have insurance, and you're not making as much money as everybody thinks you are. You can't afford to not get paid, or you can't afford to get short paid. You did the damn work. You should be paid.
You're right on. So in closing, FMCSA, use their website. Make sure the company is bonded. Double check their website, and as well as if they actually have a physical office location. Make sure they're licensed in whatever state they want you to work in, and check their references. And check the references. I wish I would have taken this advice and checked the references more thoroughly, because references don't lie.
Mm-hmm.
And carefully review the contracts that you were given. Make sure there's no fine print, all the items we outlined in the slide before. Make sure there's no crazy fees. Like, doesn't make sense. Or is it too good to be true?
Jim, we didn't even discuss that. That's exactly right. If in a suppressed economy, I remember that in North Dakota, some guy was going around telling everybody, I'm paying the trucks $125 an hour. That was a boom rate. And he was paying everybody post-crash rate that. Surprise, surprise, homeboy took the first pay app and ran, and nobody got paid.
Yep.
It's just too good to be true. So in closing, I'd like to leave you off with a quote that my old boss told me, which I wish I would have used. He said, no deal is better than a bad deal. So with that, guys, I thank you for your time, and I wish everybody the best of luck this year. And now we're going to be opening this up to questions.
Okay. Is there any questions out there?
Oh, Jim, you got this one. Okay. First question here is, I feel like I'm being singled out because I do not have a broker bond, and I do not need one. Why is it you're pretty much telling me that you're telling everybody they shouldn't come to work for me, and I'm legitimate. I do pay my bills on time. Listen, first of all, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. How I'm going to answer that question is, again, I have to put in these exact protocols for truckers to look out for. If you are, in fact, a legitimate broker, take the steps to get that broker bond, because number one, that protects the guys that are working for you. And number two, that will definitely increase your marketability to getting more trucks to work for you.
Okay, we got another question in here. You say it takes 60 to 90 days to get paid, when they say you will get paid when we get paid, but my factoring company takes care of that and pays me every day.
That's a great question.
And we don't want to spoil answering that, but we will actually be presenting a webinar on factoring.
That's correct. But I guess to answer your question, the problem is if they short pay you, first of all, factoring is a very difficult thing. And again, we'll tackle that next week, because a lot of factoring companies are also very unethical and lying and saying, we only charge a 3% rate, but they're not, disclosing all the cost after the settlement. But remember that they withhold retention, and in the event that the contractor does not pay your factoring company, the factoring company then takes you to the house. So that's definitely a high risk.
Okay, looks like another question.
I like this question.
Okay, how many trade references should a broker be able to give? What if he just gives me a couple phone numbers of his buddies? That is a very legitimate question, and that has actually happened before too. Mike, what do you think about that? Giving a couple phone numbers from buddies who are obviously say, he always pays.
That's not how it goes. You've been driving a truck. You see guys' names on their doors, especially if you're trucking in a particular region. Come on. You network with guys all over the place. You know everybody. Reach out to some of your peers, whether or not they're your friends. I would never call the broker's friends or a broker's reference. It's no different than when you go to hire a truck driver. You hire a truck driver to drive your truck. Are you really going to call his references? You're going to call his previous employers that he listed.
Call the employer.
Yeah, get the real story. So, again, calling out to people that actually work in your region or probably worked for this broker in the past, they'll tell you the real story.
Okay, looks like we have another question here. Should I have a contract with my broker? What if he demands that I sign a non-compete agreement? Should I find out how much money the broker is making off me? What is a typical percentage?
Another great question. I think signing a non-compete, I guess it depends on what the non-compete says. If the non-compete says, hey, you can't work for anybody but me, that's a bad sign.
That's a red flag.
Yeah. If this non-compete just says, hey, man, you're coming to work for a job. We're working for Turner Construction on this job, and I don't want you going to Turner Construction, that's a legitimate request.
Gotcha. Yes.
So how much money should the broker be making off of me? Ooh, what's a typical percentage? That's a very difficult question to ask. Again, that's going to be based off of risk. Who is the general contractor that the project's with? How long does it take for them to pay? Obviously, the longer it takes the general contractor to pay, the higher their percentage is going to be because of that risk factor. Because if they are a legitimate broker and they're cash flowing the project and paying everybody on time 100%, they're taking on some pretty high risk. God forbid the general contractor turns around and says, oh, by the way, I'm not paying for all these loads for some bullcrap reason.
Which has happened before. I've seen it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess in answering the last question, what is a typical percentage? I don't have an answer for that. I can lie to you and say it's 5% or 10%, but I don't know. Because again, you see some brokers out there, especially the ones that tack on fees after they tell you the rate. You know, they'll say, oh, yeah, I charge a 10% broker fee, but then there's an admin fee of 3%.
And then an office fee.
An office fee of another 2.5%. Well, now you're already at 15.5 points. So I wish I can answer that question for you. It's kind of all over the map. Okay. Well, it looks like that about wraps it up. We really appreciate everybody listening today. And again, we wish everybody the best of luck in this work season. Within the next week, we'll be recording and hosting another webcast, and that topic next week will be
factoring companies.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, again, thank you very much, guys. Drive safe out there.
Thank you.
And try to avoid the scales.